Good evening. This is Karla Minter. You're joining the webinar, Spiritual Practices for Peacemakers, Finding Your Center When You Feel Pulled Apart. And we'll give a moment for people to sign in. I see the numbers going up. Thank you for logging on early. Some of you have been waiting as we've been preparing to open. We're up to 42 participants. We were very pleased that 143 people signed up. I got emails today saying 2 couldn't make it, but then I heard others joined in their place. So we'll let those numbers go up a bit as people log on. And again, you're logging into Spiritual Practices for Peacemakers, Finding Your Center When You Feel Pulled Apart. I'm very happy to have 2 co-workers joining us to assist with this evening's webinar. Marisa Smooker is also a church relations representative, and she'll be talking with you in the chat room. If there's something that you come with this evening and you want to say it right away, she's there. She'll hear your comments. If you know Marisa, you just want to say hi, you're welcome to do that. As I'm talking, if there's a question that comes to mind, we will have a question and answer time toward the end, maybe around 7:35 or so. So there will be a time for interaction where you can type a question in the Q&A. But if there's something that comes along, a little comments or clarification that's needed, Marisa is there for you, and she will be responding in the chat room. And Ryan Gertson-Regier is our technical support person. He's the host and will be taking care of any details needed to keep us clear and up and running. Well, we've had a fast start with 59 people joining. Ryan was saying that even though a lot of people signed up, when you have a webinar like this, a lot of people don't actually come then. You know, something comes up or they forget about it. So it might be that this is about our number. So I'm going to wait a little bit yet to do our first poll, but I want to recognize those who signed up came from 12 countries and 25 states within the United States. We are a diverse group of people. When the webinar was first designed, we talked about shifts of going from despair and isolation because of the COVID-19 crisis to hope and community. We recognize a sense of loss and loneliness, but that was several months ago, and we did not know what the current situation would be. So the loss and the grief that we are experiencing now is much deeper even than what we had been experiencing during the COVID-19 time. So I want to recognize that. The tone of the webinar when it was first created didn't include the sense of deep grief and mourning and violence and injustice that we are experiencing at this time. So yes, bring those experiences into this space also. We also realize, because we are from multiple countries, different states, we come with our diverse bodies, lives, experiences, that we don't always have the same experiences at this time. As a white person living in rural Indiana, I can choose to remove myself from much of the disorientation that's happening at this time. I can isolate from COVID-19 fairly easily. I can choose whether or not to go to protests. And that is not something that that everybody can choose. And I don't want to choose to be uninvolved. So we'll be talking about that more. But all of you, welcome to this space. You are all beloved children of God. And together, in our diversity, in our unique experiences, we together are the body of Christ. To get a sense of what you hope for this meeting, there's a poll that I'd like you to respond to, and Ryan's going to launch that now. There's some very simple questions. Take a look at that right now. You know, are you hoping more for that these will create some personal spiritual practices? Are you someone who is a leader of others in their spiritual practices? Are you seeking community to grow within your spiritual life, and that includes tending to particular practices? Or maybe there's another reason. So choose the best of those 4 options, and you'll find that on your screen. Please select that and submit, and then Ryan will give us a tally of that. That'll help us get an idea of what you hope most for. So thank you for filling that out now. Some of you may be new to webinars. I participated in a few, but in this season, we are all learning how to do more of online experiences and presence. So if you haven't done a poll before, just fill in one of the circles and submit it, and we'll get the results here pretty soon. So I'll wait for Ryan. I think Ryan will just let me know when we have those.
Missing 3 votes, but I think we're going to go ahead and end the polling now. And here are our results. I don't know if you can see that, Karla. But.
Yeah, 57% of people are looking more for a personal spiritual practice. 17% or 10 people are actually leaders who would consider leading this with others. And of the spiritual practice, 33 people make up that 57%. Seeking a community for spiritual practice, 13 people, and then 2 others listed other reasons. So that's very helpful. Definitely some application to our personal lives, but some of you are leaders of leaders, and you'll be using it that way also. So thank you for that. I mentioned that this experience is not as much of a lecture as it is an experience together, a retreat of sorts. And I wanted to read a few quotes from Jane Bernard, who has written some books on retreat, creating retreat spaces. And particularly, we're working with contemplative prayers, and there are retreats where we step back to take a closer look. And then there are contemplative retreats. A contemplative retreat gives us the opportunity to practice spending time in the presence of God who loves us. The purpose of a contemplative retreat is simply to attend to God. There is no success or failure. So that's how we enter into this space. To spend time in the presence of God who loves us. Again, my name is Karla Minter, and I work with Mennonite Mission Network. Very happy to welcome you here. You'll be talking in that room with Marisa Smooker and Ryan Gertson. Marisa's asking me to say who that was. Jane Bernard has done a lot of work on retreat leading, and she's an excellent source for those types of things. V-E-N-N-A-R-D, Bernard. So in the posture of a retreat, I'd like you to examine your hands and consider how you are tending to your hands this evening. It's in the evening. Are they tense? Are they tired? Are they clenched? Notice how you're coming to this meeting, and especially your hands. I'd invite you now to open them and pay attention to what you're bringing to this meeting. As I said, we have diverse lives and unique experiences that are not all the same. Take a deep breath. I invite you to put what you're bringing into your open hands and just hold it. hold it before this group of 66 people, plus maybe these 3 presenters. So altogether, almost 70 people. Here we are together, and we bring ourselves and our unique experiences to this place. If you feel that you need to set it aside because it's in the way, go ahead and do that. Just move that stuff off to the side. Maybe you want to move it a bit toward the rest of us. We can hold it with you. So in that sense of bringing your full self to this gathering, I'd like to talk now about the kind of prayer that we're going to experience. Not only prayer, but a contemplative prayer. So why would we choose contemplative prayer? Contemplative prayer has the possibility of going deeper and truly moving toward being transformed into the image of Christ. It can move us toward being a healing presence in the world. It's a way that we can work toward healing, wholeness, and being our true selves. A contemplative prayer is a path to wholeness and transformation. It's not the only way, but it is a helpful way. In this time of heightened awareness of grief and injustices, especially racial injustice, I do want to note that on June 2nd, earlier this week, Mennonite Church USA released a statement on racial injustice, naming the mourning and the lament that we are entering at this time, the violence that we're experiencing, and calling us all to a time of prayer and lament. And as some other colleagues and I were praying this week, yesterday, my coworker Ann Jacobs began her prayer saying, "I'm asking for grace because these are very difficult times. I'm asking for grace," as she moved into her prayer time. As I was preparing for the seminar, the word grace struck me. In an article about this seminar, we use Marjorie Thompson's definition of a spiritual discipline or spiritual practice. They are certain practices that can help us attend to the work of grace in our lives and our times. That really stood out to me, the word grace. Anne had asked for grace yesterday, and the prayers that we're attending today can foster in us, can become a work of grace in our lives and our times, especially during these times where we are needing to listen closely to one another, care for one another, work toward understanding. Another article that I came across as I was considering a contemplative prayer is Richard Rohr's article. In the Sojourners magazine, Richard Rohr wrote on white privilege, and this is January 2016, several years ago. He had a conversation with Reverend Rommel Toon, and again, it's January 19, 2016, Richard Rohr on white privilege. And he talks about why he thinks that contemplative prayer is so important. So I've copied that and I've used this several times, and I had forgotten about it until today when I was preparing for this. So when we ask why contemplative, why prayer, and why contemplative prayer, here's a reason that is specifically, especially helpful for our time now. So this is Richard Rohr, who is a Christian leader. He's a Franciscan, and he does extensive writing on the Christian life. So the question is to him, how can the contemplative tradition and mediation serve as tools to help people overcome white privilege? So he responds, the person asking the question is an African American, and Richard Rohr responding is a person who's Anglo or white Caucasian, whatever term you choose to use. Rohr responds, some form of contemplative practice is the only way, apart from great love and great suffering, to rewire people's minds and hearts. It is the only form of prayer that dips into the consciousness and changes people at deep levels, where all the wounds, angers, and recognitions lie hidden. Prayer that is too verbal, too social, too extreme, too heady, never changes people at the level where they really need to change. Only some form of prayer of quiet changes people for good and for others in any long-term way. It sustains and deepens the short-term wisdom we learn in great love and great suffering. And then he says his final statement, "Forgive me for making this an absolute statement, but I believe it from years of working with people." Why do we use contemplative prayer? Because it works within us to transform us into the image of Christ, to bring healing into the presence, to bring a healing presence in the world, and because we need to be healed, whole, and find our true selves. So let's try a prayer, a contemplative prayer, and a good place to find words for prayer is the Psalm. And this Psalm is Psalm 46. It starts out as a psalm it's a strong language, and there's some disorientation in the wording, and then it moves into a quiet place. So I'm going to read the whole psalm, and again, maybe this is a time where you want to again bring what is in your hands and offer it to God as you listen to the strong language in this prayer. Psalm 46, and then I'll explain more about a particular kind of centering prayer. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city. It shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in uproar. The kingdoms totter. He utters his voice. The earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our strength. Come behold the works of the Lord. See what desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. You can see at the end where it switches to be God's voice who says that last phrase. The Psalms give us words for prayer. So I'm going to introduce centering prayer, and some of you are likely very experienced in centering prayer, and for some of you it may be new. On our website, and we can include those links at some point, either in the evaluation later on, or maybe now in the chat room. Mennonite Mission Network has a website that includes 4 contemplative prayers, and they were chosen by our Peace Justice Support Network leader, Jason Boone, in collaboration with some Mennonite spiritual directors. And they've been on the website for several years and have been very helpful and used in many ways. So you'll find a description of each of the prayers there. And today I'm using centering prayer. And centering prayer is rooted in the Psalms. In fact, the Psalm that we just read, when there's that call to be still and know that I am God. It's a simple, wordless way of praying. It makes space for simply being with God and becoming more deeply aware of God's presence. It's not meant to necessarily completely replace other forms of prayer, but when it's practiced regularly, it can create the fruits, and you find these in the fruits of the Spirit of love, joy, peace, and healing that it can produce. So when we talk about spiritual practices for peacemakers, It's something that can help turn us toward a faithful response in the world. So let's try this now. You may begin with maybe 5 or 10 minutes, working up to 20 minutes at home, but online that would be a long time. So I'm going to do a variation of a centering prayer using a phrase from Psalm 46, verse 10, to get you a bit of an idea of what it feels like to go into that quiet place. But still, we're going to prepare as if we were going into a longer centering prayer. And again, notice where you're sitting. Find a comfortable space. Might want to adjust your seating position. Take some breaths. It's in the late afternoon for some of you, evening for some of us. And I know there was Naomi Tice from Australia was registered. If she was able to join, she's on the other side of the world. So for all of us, take a deep breath no matter what time it is. And now focus your attention on God. Become aware of God's presence surrounding you. Allow yourself to be present with God. As I lead you in this prayer, there'll be a time where I get to a quiet place, and you'll know when that happens. There are fewer words, and then I'll just go into a quiet place. When you're in that quiet place, if your mind starts thinking of a lot of things, it may be helpful to choose a word to focus on, a word such as light, peace, love, joy, or a word of your choosing. So think now about a word that can help bring you back into letting go and listening for God. While we're in that quiet, and it won't be more than about 2 minutes of quiet, just know that you are being cared for. I won't leave you there for too long, but sit quietly and listen for God's presence, quietly returning to that word that will keep you focused. And then I'll bring us back up out of the prayer. The picture may also help you focus. So pray a version of a centering prayer with me using the words of Psalm 46:10 and spending some time in quiet in the middle. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Be. Be still. Be still and know. Be still and know that I am God. Now you can come back to the group. Take a deep breath. For some of you, that may have been the first time that you tried some silence like that with a group, and especially online. And I'm wondering, how did that feel? What did you experience? How was that for you? Consider if that is a prayer practice that you might be able to continue to use, and how it might fit into the practices that you're needing now. What we find over our lifetime is that there are times when a spiritual works very well, and then it stops working. And it might be that in this time of significant disorientation and deep pain, maybe you're needing a new spiritual practice. And consider if one of these contemplative practices might be something that you'd be called to. If you feel stuck, or if you feel like you cannot pray, that's a good sign that you're ready for something different, and you also may want to talk with your pastor or a friend or a spiritual director. I see some people were saying it felt very peaceful, that it worked. Someone says, lovely, I want more silent time. Our lives are busy, even almost more in this COVID-19 time, with people with children at home, especially. That's a high stress situation. And is there a way you could, a minute a day to set aside, and then maybe 5? Several people were saying, yeah, very useful. They'd like to know about this. And it's the kind of prayer, you don't have to do it perfectly. And remember, a spiritual practice is pointing you to the God who loves you. So it's not that the practice itself has to be done perfectly. Vehicle, it's a tool. It points you toward God, and God loves you because you're created in God's image. So there's nothing to fear. So I'm glad that you had a good experience with that. We can talk more about how you may want to practice with that. Another reason we do this is because Jesus showed us how to pray. You'll remember that Jesus often went to the mountaintop. I don't know if he did a centering kind of prayer. He might have been loud in those early morning hours on the mountain, but it might have been one of these quiet kind of prayers. We see Jesus going off to pray right at the beginning of Mark chapter 1, verses 35. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. He's giving us an example of how we also can learn to know who his creator, who his father is, the divine creator. And then we know the story about the feeding of the 5,000, but before that, the disciples and Jesus were trying to find a deserted, quiet place. And after the feeding of the 5,000, this is Mark 6, verse 45 and 46. He puts the disciples in the boat, and then, after saying farewell to them, he went up on the mountain to pray. So we have this example of prayer that we can follow. Jesus offers it for us. I want to note that the prayers of quiet come out of a tradition that is, I'm not sure if I'm right about this. I will say, when we talked about disorientation and orientation, a tradition that is perhaps more oriented, less disruption. And I'm wondering, if we listened to voices of people at the margins, how our contemplative prayers would change. I would like to explore that with those of you who are feeling the call to do that. In spiritual direction circles, when I attend seminars, the spaces are very white. The Spiritual Directors International periodical, the magazine they publish, does have diverse people from all over the world participating, submitting articles and that type of thing. But here in the Midwest, in the US, those spaces do not include a lot of people of color, and that is a loss. And we're missing something if the prayers are only coming from people with a particular life experience. I had a friend tell me not too long ago that we may think of contemplation as quiet, but not necessarily. In some cultures, contemplation might be singing, dancing, moving, walking. And she provided a tree of contemplation. And this is from the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society. And there, in this tree, there is a branch of stillness for meditation, silence, and centering. Then there's a branch for the generative, such as Lectio Divina and certain kinds of meditation. And then there's the creative branch, music, singing, journaling, improvisation, contemplative arts. Then there's the activist branch. Do we think of this as being within contemplation? Pilgrimages to areas where social justice issues are highlighted, work and volunteering, vigils and marches, bearing witness. These too are contemplative. So I don't want to leave these other expressions of contemplation and finding God in those places out of the conversation. Relational, deep listening, storytelling, dialogue, movement like walking, dance, yoga, labyrinth, and then ritual, retreats and ceremonies, and establishing sacred place. Many ways to experience God and be transformed into God's presence so that you can engage the world in love. So we talked about Jesus' example of prayer and engaging the world in love. Let's also look at Jesus in Matthew 21. In Matthew 21, 12 to 13, Jesus cleanses the temple, is how some people would say that. He's upset. He goes in and overturns the tables. So let's read this. Let's read here what happens. Matthew 21, 12 to 13. Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." So do we think of this as contemplation? A time where Jesus took action by turning over tables in the face of corruption and injustice. So we have Jesus in silence and solitude, but also in the acting in the face of corruption and injustice. This too can be contemplative. So this is a good time for questions and answers. We've welcomed one another. We've experienced a contemplative prayer. I do want to say another important part of our time together will be to invite you to a learning community where you can continue to explore spiritual practices with others. And so there are 3 additional spiritual practices that contemplative prayers, which would be each of the next weeks we would work on prayer of awareness, praying the scriptures, which is Lectio Divina, and the Jesus prayer, and if you would like to put that together into a rule of life. A rule of life is like making a grocery list before you go to the store, just so you've thought through what you want to get. And if you forget the list, it's okay, because you've thought through and you have a sense of what you want to include in the process. And we can talk more about that. But if you have questions so far, this is a good time where you can go and put them in the question and answer. Now there are some chats here. Marisa, are there any chats that are also questions? Don't see any. Someone asked about the, the prayer, the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society, www.contemplativemind.org, created this image that I shared with you. I found that helpful because I think there was a time when I was considering things that were contemplative as always being quiet, but that suits me because I'm an introvert. And for people who are extroverted, or people whose life experiences include a lot more connection with people, certainly things that are very active and engaging can also be contemplative and point us to God. Here's a question. Someone's saying they could use this at the same time that they're doing their like other breathing and meditation exercises. And I would say yes, and use words as you breathe in and out. Do you think fasting is a contemplative practice? That's an interesting question. I wonder if it would have more to do with your approach to it. I'll think about that. I don't often think of fasting as connected to contemplative, but thank you for asking. If I find more information, I'll let you know. Okay, if there are more questions, go ahead and put them there. There's one, I see. Okay, let's talk more now about the learning communities. Something I'm finding is that it's helpful to move beyond just giving information. Like I can say, I'm here and welcome, here's some information, and then we say goodbye. Another way to work at growing and learning together is to say, would you like to continue now in a conversation where several of us can build relationship and continue in the conversation, and then maybe you yourself can continue that with others. It's a way of growing the experience. And I'm calling that, and it often is called, a learning community. The way you can sign up for a learning community is tomorrow when you get a follow-up email about this webinar. It will ask you several questions, and one will be, the first one is, yes, sign me up for a learning community. And it would begin the next day, meeting once a week, probably on Thursday, so it'd be the next 3 Thursdays from now. The learning community, originally I had said 30 days, but I think that's a little long because that gets into the holiday weekend, the July 4th weekend. So if we were to do 21 days, it would begin tomorrow through June 26th. And there would be a Zoom call where a group of 12 to 15 would gather together weekly, and we would experience additional contemplative prayers, have a discussion, how to introduce it, experience it, talk about how you might apply it to your life, and also we'll get to know one another and support one another in that journey. And then at the end, also possibly create a rule of life that you can do that for yourself then moving forward. How would you like to implement this into your life? There's also some questions about like if you'd want to give further ideas for additional webinars, or if you'd like to be on our mailing list, or maybe you say, thank you, but I don't want to be on any of those lists. that will be sent to you by email tomorrow. So if you'd like to sign up for a learning community, please do that. That will be your opportunity. If there are too many people for one group, then we'll decide how to handle that. Then we may have several leaders, or maybe one of you is already ready to be a leader. We would be open to talking about that.
Karla, I'll just note that I have copied the link to our form for expressing interest in the group or just as an evaluation of this webinar in both the Q&A and the chat box. So this is the same link you'll receive tomorrow in a follow-up email, but if you want to go ahead and complete that form now, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and that way if you have any questions about how we worded it, sometimes we think we worded it well, but maybe we missed something. So you're welcome to take a look at that there. And you'd sign up right away if you want, or you can think about it, and tomorrow you'll get an opportunity. Well, thank you for spending time online with a prayer of quiet. That took a bit of concentration, but I appreciate you joining us for that. And as we move toward the end, I'd like you to bring back the ritual, the image of your hands, and consider if what you brought to the meeting, is it the same? Maybe what you've held there has been lightened, or maybe you've discovered some new things. We're ending a little soon, but I think that's okay. And I offer a blessing on your hands. And again, Jesus modeled this for us. There's multiple stories of either a woman, or in John, it's Mary, as Jesus is sitting at the table eating together with friends. Mary anoints his feet. He allows someone to come and anoint him. And then in the next chapter, John 13, Jesus actually demonstrates to the disciples how he washes their feet, takes a towel and washes their feet as a symbol of servant leadership, and he blesses them. And I would like to offer this as a thing for you. Before we do that, someone is asking for links, prayers. There was an email Ryan sent with Mission Network prayers. And if you go to MennoniteMission.net, www.MennoniteMission.net, resources, prayer, then you'll find all 4 of the contemplative prayers. If you start with centering prayer, the others will come up. I'll take some more questions at the end, but I would like to offer this blessing to you in the spirit of Jesus also receiving anointing and then washing his own disciples' feet. And especially during these times of grief, anxiety, uncertainty, difference of experience, we can bless one another as we encounter one another, as we worship together, as we're here today. So I have the towel, and a cloth. So if you could hold your hands up, imagine the water pouring over them. And whether your hands are in the posture of praying or grieving, maybe they're turning over tables. Maybe they're holding on or letting go. Maybe they're giving or receiving. Praying. Receive that blessing as your hands return to the work of your lives. And now, are there some more questions that you'd like me to respond to? Yeah, someone's saying the idea of silent prayers and meditation has been helpful. Thank you for centered prayer, has been very meaningful. And someone mentioned an experience of severe racism. Yeah. I am struggling to center myself in peace when I feel pulled apart and I am engaged in injustice. I would appreciate if you talk about any wisdom and spiritual practice to have to handle anger. Everybody's experience is different, but overall, this type of prayer provides the opportunity for you to notice what's happening internally and to respond or to offer it to God. I certainly don't want to say that this is a shutting down of emotions. It is a prayer of quiet, but I would say that it allows your emotions to be real. So this small amount of time together is only a start. So I encourage you to keep talking with people who care for you. And if you want to join the learning community, we can go deeper. I'm also very interested in those of you who have trauma healing training. How can we combine the knowledge from trauma healing and the experience from prayer and put them together to create a very healing experience? I know some people have worked on healing rituals. Ritual is also very helpful. So yes, there is room in the Christian experience for addressing pain and healing. Someone in Africa, yeah. When I was in seminary, I had some African students that did not like silent prayer. And there was a man in a prayer class with me, and he says, I'm not going to like this. And he tried the centering prayer, and he came back and he says, actually, he said, there's something that happened in me. And he said, I was changed. So he gave it a try. But that is also a good experience where you don't have to do it the same way. Maybe try a silent prayer, but then the joy cries that I've heard in Kenya and the expressive dancing, that is also deep prayer. So yes, thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of tensions. I think a very short answer, how do we deal with the strong feelings that people have for each other? I guess I would start by saying I have to work with myself first. And that is a big job in itself. So if we can work at ourselves and our response to others, that's an important start. But keep talking with people, keep building relationships with people, and that's a good place. Someone says, ask them where it hurts. I know that was, there's a podcast where the presenter talks about that. I think someone mentioned that earlier in the comments. We could even, with the questions I'm seeing here, there would be space for a whole webinar on trauma and healing. And if that's a topic that you're interested in, submit that and we'd be glad to look for resources. And like I say, I'm really interested in those of you who professionally are involved in peace work and are working at secondary trauma or primary trauma and needing to work at that in order to be effective in your witness, in the call that you have to respond peaceably and yet also with action. Okay. In the lectionary this week, and this is the first week of Pentecost, reminding us of the Trinity. And I love the blessings from Corinthians, and I offer this to you along with the blessing from your hands. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you. Thank you for joining us. Blessings on your evening, and God be with you.